today.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back. We're back here with the Islamic Finance Part 2 episode. So, Imam Brahim, thank you for coming back on. Umama, thanks for joining us this time.
Of course.
Imam Brahim, I know we set the foundation for a lot of things in that last episode, so I kind of wanted to get down to specific questions. And one that I was really thinking about that kind of impacts a lot, like at least the three of us, because we're right around that age, was buying your first house, right? Because everyone talks about the fact that you need an Islamic loan. I guess, like, could you talk about what an Islamic loan curtails, like what it's about, and just should we be going for an Islamic loan, or like can I go for an FHA loan, like help myself down the line?
Okay. So, before answering that question, let's talk about loans in general.
Okay, let's do it.
In Islam, there's two types of contracts. There are contracts of mukayasa. Mukayasa means that you're trying to take an edge over someone else. Each person, they're trying to, like, I'm trying to get profit off of you and you're trying to get a good sale, right? So when the contract happens, there's a lot of back and forth, right? You're hassling, or hustling, I guess, I don't know. That is one type of contract, and that contract is when you're trading two goods. But then the other type of contract is mukarama. Mukarama is out of nobility, and you're trying to elevate that individual, or you're trying to help them, or you're trying to treat them kindly. A loan is under which contract?
What kind of loan are we talking about? Just to jump, it's the first one.
I'm talking Islamically. A loan would fall under which one of these two?
Technically,
the
it should be the second.
The second.
No, not technically.
It is the second.
It should be the second, right? That's why when you give a loan, it should not be more than what you have given. Inflation or no inflation, it doesn't matter. What
Okay.
I offer, if Sister Umama is in, she needs to have a surgery, and the surgery is like $10,000. I am offering that $10,000, and you can give it. I'm not going to expect you to give me back 15 or 20 or 30, right? Because I'm doing you a favor. I'm helping you out. The idea of a loan is to increase brotherhood between the Muslims. That's what matters in the Islamic context of a loan. In a capitalist society, everything must be for something. That's what I can't do anything for the good of the other. I have to maximize my own interests. That's the whole point of a capitalist environment. And so a loan in a capitalist sense is saying, okay, I'm offering you money for now, but that money is costing me because I don't have access to it. And so for the time in which it's not going to be in my possession, and for the cost of inflation, and for the risk of return, and all these other things, I'm going to say, okay, I'll give you the $10,000 for your surgery, but I'm expecting after 5 years that it's 25, right? And so that kind of sale is haram because of the wisdom of it, that it breaks brotherhood, it doesn't make it. And on top of that, the philosophy of the loan to begin with is flawed because the loan is not meant to do that. Also, from the other reasons why loans are haram is that it creates money from money. That's what in essence, that's what you're doing, right? You're creating money out of money. Thinking that time factors into that. But in reality, that's not what happens. Resources in the broad sense are always limited. That's what makes them precious. And so, for all these purposes, loans in general that are profit-based are haram. Now, how does that play in a house? Do you have $300,000 to buy a house?
I don't.
I mean, well,
You don't, right?
a third of us are graduated, so
And I'm guessing with graduation,
Yeah.
there's
Student debt.
student loan or debt, or you're paying off your car. You're trying to get married, and the girls are like, I want a $75,000 wedding and all that stuff, right? So obviously, if you had 300 grand, it's not necessarily going to go to the house first. You're going to pay off other things. God forbid you go Hajj with that money, right?
not with these student loans.
So
Inshallah.
because of that the scenario that we live in, people don't have the cash on hand to pay for their homes. And so they're put in a position where, how can I buy a home because it's a necessity, right? And we're talking about people who need it out of necessity, not people who don't. If, let's say, you're already a millionaire and you can buy a house, then why would you get a loan, right? And so in that case, obviously, the default position of the contract is haram, and so there is no pressure on you to even pursue it. And so it's haram regardless for that individual. An individual who is, miskin, right? They're students, they're trying to get married, and perhaps, if they don't get married, they'll fall into something that's haram. Living in rent or paying rent is never going to benefit you, right? You're always, the money's going away. You're not getting it back. And so that causes another harm. One of the things that the Islam protects is wealth, right? And rent destroys wealth. It doesn't necessarily help with, you maximizing your own wealth. Obviously, special scenarios are different, but generally speaking, rent is always going to harm your wealth. And so because of that, you have options to do something that is questionable. All the scholars agree that Islamic loans in the American context, because of how the American framework works, it's never going to be fully Islamic. And there are details upon details, such as liability and the time and the nature of the sale and all this stuff, right? They don't even look at it as a loan sometimes. They look at it as a resale with profit, right? And so forgetting all that gray area stuff, that it's not necessarily a purely Islamic loan. Even the people who are in these Islamic loans, they will say that this is not purely Islamic. There are flaws. For somebody who is trying to get a house, because they're in a sense of hardship and difficulty, then they can take a loan to get their house. Now, you have two options. You can either go for the gray area, which is the Islamic loan, right? It's not clearly halal, and it's not necessarily clearly haram. It's somewhere in between. Or you can go for something that is cheaper, and most people say that it's haram, while some people have allowed it. That goes back to the individual and the capacity of that individual. And so when a person is going to buy a house, they're going to weigh their options. A traditional mortgage may cost less in the long run, and in the short term where they have to pay the initial fees, it'll actually cost less for them in certain scenarios. While another individual, and perhaps that's what they can afford. And the fatwa is there for those who are in need, and for example, they're trying to live in a proper district that has good schooling for children or whatever it may be, and so they need that cheaper option. The fatwa is there to allow that people can pursue a traditional mortgage under certain conditions of difficulty and strain and hardship. Other people who have a little bit of leeway, right, and they are able to pay the extra, then perhaps it's better for them to stick to what is closer to the halal. Now, if a person is capable of saving money regardless, right, and let's say they put $100 in Bitcoin in 2000 eight or whenever it came out, and all of a sudden they're millionaires, right? They've done their job, and so they can buy it cash, right? They can liquidate their assets and buy it cash. I don't know if you can buy a house with Bitcoin at this point. I don't think so. So they can buy it cash, and for that person, they should stick to the cash option, even if they have to rent for a little bit until they're able to pay it off. And so it's very circumstantial.
What's the take on, so like say you're trying to build wealth through like passive income, right? Just like through rental income. So you buy that first house, maybe you want it cheaper, so you do like the 3.5% down, get your FHA loan. When you want to do that next house, like technically I guess you have the equity to buy a home, but you may not have the cash on hand. Could you just do another loan, or is that more of like a you shouldn't do it?
We're talking about so if it were a traditional loan, then no, it is haram for the second home to be a traditional mortgage.
Okay.
But for the Islamic loan, to have more than one home, the scholars have allowed that.
Okay.
Right, but even the scholars that allowed a traditional mortgage, they said that this must be for your first house, because that's a necessity. Now, there's a principle in fiqh. There are the scholars compiled a codex of sorts that make it easier for you to understand the philosophy of the Sharia. And so one of the codes, I guess, or the rules for you that would help you in your decisions, al-amru idha daqa tasa' wa idha tasa'a daq, that a situation, if it's constrained, then your options are wider, and if it's a very easy situation, then your options are more slim. So as your situation eases, your choices are restrained, and vice versa, or inverse of it,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
So Islamic loans over renting, though, is that like your personal opinion?
Again, it's circumstantial.
Oh, sorry.
If the person can rent for 5 years,
Bro, what if you get like a
and
rent
within
controlled
those 5
apartment?
years he can buy a house, then rent. Why
Yeah.
get a mortgage?
Rent control. Not gonna find many rent control apartments, but rent control.
What?
Do you
rent control?
rent controlled apartments?
Oh, okay.
I don't know what that is.
It's like where
I'm gonna act like I know what that
in
is.
certain areas the government will set a cap on how much rent the landlord can charge a tenant. So if in certain areas you conceivably get like a nice apartment that would be going for a lot more, but it'll be like $500 a month. So it just caps it. There's just not enough supply to make it. It's always in demand because there's not enough supply. Because some people would want, obviously you'd want to pay $500 for a nice studio in a nice city.
Right.
But switching to like stocks, one thing that's really popular, whether it be in our own friend circles, or just in general, has definitely been the idea of options. Purely because I feel like for a lot of people, when you buy an option, right, whether it be a call or a put, the earning potential is crazy. Because for a lot of those people, they don't even need to exercise the contract. You just sell the contract back onto somebody else.
Sell it in the money. Like it's literally just a quick flip, right? Like people don't have the patience of waiting for a stock to go up. So like they want to just have that quick earning.
Honestly, though, if you're making like $10,000 off like a couple contracts, like why would you wait?
Exactly. Yeah.
But even for like options and everything, the main thing that I've heard about that is like there's an extreme risk involved. So would that be one of the reasons why like it's haram in a sense, or what's the main reason why options are haram?
You're a finance major?
Yeah.
That's
So-
a bad start.
Halal and haram is not a matter of risk.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of understanding between two parties. So a stock, in essence, is you're a partner in a company, right? You're buying and selling. So a stock is halal or haram depending on what it is that's being sold. Like let's say Masani. I wanted to say it, but I wasn't sure.
It's all good.
Let's say Masani is selling a pizza shop, right?
Love
Or
it.
it has a pizza shop, and I want to come in as a partner and invest in it, right? That's kind of what a stock is. Now, if you're selling haram pizza, is it halal for me to be a partner?
No.
No, right? So that needs to be in consideration when you're looking at the options, right? The options that you're looking at, does it have to do with things that are halal or things that are haram? Now, if Masani's pizza shop is completely halal, right, then it's okay.
To do options on that?
No, the stock.
Okay. Oh.
Options is another discussion entirely. Now, options, I haven't read too much about it. I need to do more homework. But briefly, what I've seen from the more conservative side, which is before you make a decision on any of these, you want to first read the conservative side before the liberal side of things. Liberal here in the sense of people who are more loose with the rulings and people who are more strict with the rulings. Start with the strict in the beginning, just because you want to be careful, out of caution. So the more conservative scholars have said that it's haram. Why do they say it's haram? They say that it's not a matter of what's being traded in the stock per se. It's really the fact that, at least the way they explained it, was it's kind of like insurance, that you're paying for a certain time. And then after that time, the sale automatically happens or whatever details of the contract are. Each options are the option contracts range from different types. Generally speaking, it's a matter of time, right? And so because that time, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. That vagueness in the contract of not knowing what's going to happen with the stock, that's where the option is, right?
Yeah.
To put or to call.
Yeah.
Because you're unsure, you don't know. In Arabic, that's called al-gharar. Al-gharar means that I don't know, it's ambiguous. And that kind of sale is haram from one angle of the lack of knowledge, right? You're paying money for something in the future that may or may not happen. So what are you paying for in reality? For a possibility.
Does that
Right.
make all kinds of insurance like haram? Like, I'm just trying to think like, and
The
that
default
aspect,
of insurance is that it's haram. The
right?
default
So like
of
health insurance, car insurance, like
yes, they're all haram. Now,
Damn.
the reason why we use them goes back to my first principle,
Necessity.
right?
Capitalist system.
Out of well, yeah, but no, I'm talking about the rules, right? The rules that we have, that if a situation is tight, then it loosens in its rulings, and if the situation is loose, then it restricts in its rulings. So why is insurance, the default of it is that it's haram, but it's allowed because you can't have a car without it.
Yeah.
Can you really live without a car? No, right? Unless you're in New York and you're always using the subway, that's different.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you have to have insurance. Why is insurance haram? Because it's riba. It's not interest. It's usurious. How is it usurious?
Because the other
I'm
party
paying for
gains from
something
it.
that I might never see. I mean, when I tell you guys these
No.
health insurance, oh no,
That's part of why.
You
that's,
just said that.
That's gharar. That's gharar. That's not riba. that's gharar, not riba. What is riba? Right.
Oh.
Riba is
That
two kinds.
Other party gains from it and you lose from it technically.
I'm giving money over time
yes.
in the anticipation that if something happens, you give me money in return.
Okay.
Right.
Is
We're-
that
we're
money
back to
going
the
to be?
insurance part.
Is that money going to be the same that I'm giving, or is it more likely than not going to be less? Right. And so is that not like a loan that I'm giving someone a loan and I'm getting something unequal to what I have given? That's riba.
Can't you say the same thing about like a stock? Like, let's say you want to buy a stock, like you don't have that guarantee,
Yeah,
right?
there's
A stock
always
is a
an
good.
uncertain.
A stock is a good.
I know, but you have no guarantee that,
Insurance is money for money. A stock is money for an item,
like, so
and
then-
money for an item is different.
But does it matter? Like then you have to go into like what the actual stock is then, right? Because certain stocks are not like there are just straight money stocks, like ETF stocks.
Yeah.
Like they're not necessarily just
and
a
that-
good, right? Like you're not buying just specifically like.
But you're a part of a
physical good,
business. You're being part of the business, right? So it's not necessarily the same.
I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Even though you can equate certain things with stocks to gambling, right?
Yeah.
Like day trading or forex or these other natures of these quick sales that are happening now with the
GameStop.
instruments that are used. GameStop.
AMC.
It seems if you were forget about the actual thing that's being traded, right? There is this sense of gambling to it. And so, in that sense, you want to be careful because you don't want to develop a habit. And those habits are addictive and they're very dangerous and destructive.
Yeah. I was just gonna complain about health insurance premiums, but
By
I
what?
guess I was wrong. Like health insurance premiums? Have you guys have you guys started working and then like you've been paying for like your health insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been paying,
They're
but I've
ridiculous.
never used it. Like I don't even have like my primary care doctor set yet. I'm just like,
Wait until you have a kid and see those premiums skyrocket.
no, I'm good.
I actually don't have health insurance, and even when I was like looking at the price of it, because some health insurance you get like a discounted rate by going to like the marketplace or something, and even for 4 people alone in my family, like I was like, this price is way too much, and that's why I just paid out of pocket for any services that I needed.
Yeah.
I want to wrap back around the convo about stocks, just because I want to like have a more of a distinction on this. What is the take on buying to actually invest in the company versus buying to sell, right? Because right now, especially, for a lot of people, like when you're like just reading the charts, you see a breakout coming, you're waiting for the candlesticks to get in the right spot. So you're waiting, like, I might wait a week or 2 weeks and I'm just going to sell it versus like, you have your blue chip stocks. You're like, I'm going to hold on to this for a while. What's the distinction there between actually investing to invest in the company and investing because I know I'm going to sell them in, a year?
Ultimately, you're going to sell it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you're doing, so think of a stock as an item that you're buying to sell. Now, if I buy this water bottle anticipating that there will be less water in the future, meaning its price will go up, I'm buying it for now, knowing that later its price will go up. It's an item. It's something that it's physical. I've given its money and I've paid its worth and I've gotten the item. And I can sell it at a later time. In that case, it's okay.
Okay.
So stocks, if you think of them in that sense, they are halal. Now the issue is that if I tell Maz, right?
Yeah.
If I say, Maz, here's $100, give me this water bottle when it comes to a certain time. This is the contract. This kind of contract it's not necessarily allowed because the trade has to happen in the instance of the agreement. And stocks, they do happen when you buy it and stuff. It's all happening in real time. And so that's not something to worry about unless you start talking about these other types of trades like day trading and others. Some of the scholars said that because what's happening is I'm giving you the wealth and I'm not getting the immediate item. What's happening is you're flipping it before I even see it. And so I haven't gotten anything in return when I gave you the money. So they say that this is something that's haram.
I guess with the time, there's just a lot to take in. I know you've had
have
this
to
convo with
unbundle
me.
this
Yeah,
kind of
you've had this
thing.
convo
We
with me
spent
and Maz
3-4
too.
semesters learning this stuff. So.
Yeah. I feel like one of my like big takeaways from like even like the first convo we had pre this podcast just on the Zoom, you were telling a story about how there were people throwing like rings at certain things, and that was like the bundle of items you would get. You recall? Ring a bell?
Yeah, so the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited the sales that, so they used to have like, back when they didn't used to sell clothing that we have today, right? They used to sell cloth, and then you would go to a tailor, and the tailor would make it. So what they used to do is they used to put cloth on the floor, right? Spread throughout. And kind of like in North Carolina, we have something called Carowinds. I think here it's Six Flags, right?
Yeah.
They have those little things where you throw, and wherever it lands, you know, you're either going to get a prize or not.
Yeah.
So in those scenarios, they'll say, okay, you buy a stone or something, and you throw it, and if it lands on a piece of cloth, whatever you get, you know. In that regards, it's haram because you don't know what exactly you've bought, and so that's what the Prophet ﷺ was prohibiting. There are other sales like that where, for example, you know, they'll sell an unborn sheep, right? The sheep is pregnant and saying, okay, I'm gonna sell the baby, not the whole sheep, not the pregnant sheep, just the baby. But you don't know has the baby come out. You don't know what, you know, are there going to be deficiencies, etc. So these kind of things, you know, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So does that make like raffles haram, right? Because in that sense, like when you buy like a raffle ticket, you have no idea what you're gonna get. You could get something that wasn't like the main prize.
Mm-hmm.
What?
So there are a lot of details where they would say, okay, what exactly are you buying, right? This is where I'm telling you the more conservative versus the liberal. A conservative faqih would tell you, no, it's haram because you don't know what you're getting in return.
Okay.
A more liberal person would say, no, what you've bought was the ticket. Now, you know, what happens afterwards, that's different. So, you know, this is where I'm telling you there's a range in fiqh over who's going to decide what. But I'm telling you, take the conservative approach first.
Okay.
And then if, you know, you want to look to maximize your assets. You know, the Sharia welcomes this. Now, if you find yourself unconvinced of the conservativeness, you think that this is too much, read more about it, look into what the scholars have said, talk to the people who know about these kind of contracts. And I suggest looking at Sheikh Joe Bradford's content. He's really good, and he has classes for youth and stuff like that. He'll break it down for you. And once you see it broken down, you become more clear with, you know, what you're dealing with. And perhaps that conservative approach was for a circumstantial contract that doesn't necessarily go to the other contracts that are separate from it. And so studying it would give you more clarity.
Raheem, I've got one more question before we let you go tonight. So it's coming up to that time of the year where like you have to figure out your zakat payments. And I wanted to ask you, what is the impact of like your investments on your zakat payments? Especially because as we're talking, like sometimes you might not have like realized like the value from those investments. Mm-hmm. Do those impact your payments in any way, or do you not count them?
So, zakah is not restricted to Ramadan, except zakat al-fitr.
Okay.
That is $10 per person. You know, Masjid explains that. That's a different type of zakat. There's the other zakat al-mal. That is not restricted by Ramadan. Zakat al-mal is basically you have to reach a certain threshold, which is I think it was 95 grams of gold, right? The equivalent of 95 grams of gold, which is like I think $5,000.
Nice.
Something like that. So you have to get to $5,000.
Okay.
These numbers could be different. I don't know, but I know 95 grams of gold, whatever that is today. $5,000. You reach $5,000, you have to maintain this the total worth of what you are above 5,000 for one whole year.
Okay.
Let's say something happens and you have to pay a medical bill and you go down to 2,000, and then 3 months later you build back up to 5,000. The clock restarts. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what are the assets that you look at when you're calculating your net worth? Right? First, you would look at your savings. Then you would look at the assets that you own, not the assets that you don't own, right? So you would say, okay, I have $5,000 in my bank, and I also have $10,000 worth of stocks. That means my total worth is $15,000. At the end of that year, you take 15,000 and you multiply it by 2.5%. I don't know, is it like 250 plus 125?
You probably done math all
Something
day.
like
I don't
that.
know if we're gonna get this right.
$375? Something like that.
Give or take.
Yeah. So that's what your zakah would be for that 1 year. It has to happen at the end of the year. Now, do you have to pay it immediately? No. People wait till Ramadan to pay that money because of the barakah of Ramadan. But it's not in Ramadan. It's actually after one whole year, one whole lunar year that cycles. And that's how you pay your zakah. So you would consider how much you have in savings. You would consider how much you own in assets, right? And what you make in profit goes under your savings, right? You're calculating all of this,
Okay.
putting it all together. Now, any tools that you're using are not considered, they're not, you don't pay zakah on it. So if you own a house for yourself that you're living in, you don't have to pay zakah on it, right? If you're flipping the house, then the worth of the house is considered in zakah,
Okay.
right? So a realtor who I don't know about a realtor, but let's say somebody owns 5 houses and he intends to sell these houses for profit, then he would calculate the worth of these houses. But if he's renting them out, he would simply use the money that he's renting.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There, like I said.
There's a lot. But no.
So zakah is one thing, financials is another.
All right.
But yeah, you would have to pay after 1 year, as long as it's above whatever 95 grams of gold equals. I forgot what it was. I think it was like close to 5, right? You have to maintain that for 1 whole year, and then you would pay 2.5% over it. Whether it's stocks, however worth your stocks is, your 401k, because that's money. Now 401k, what you do is your 401k minus however much the government takes from it, right? So you'd put that in your calculus, and then you also look into any other assets that you own for sale, that are for sale, not for private thing. The Hanafis, just for the girls, the Hanafis, they consider that gold that you have for leisure is you have to pay zakah on its worth. However, the majority of scholars, they say no, you don't have to do this if you're keeping it for your own. It's like a necklace or something.
Use.
You don't have to pay zakah on it.
All right. Well, Mama, Mas, anything you want to ask?
No, you answered all my questions that I had. Well, Musani did. So. Yeah.
This topic is not a podcast topic. It's an educational topic.
Yeah.
So it needs to be done at length. You need to first start with the basics and then go from there. Now, what I would advise, I would hope to conclude this podcast like this, is to learn the concepts, but also to appreciate how detailed the Sharia is. The fact that all this stuff was spoken about 1,000 years ago, right, in such a sophisticated way, while Europeans were in their dark ages, and the Muslims were sitting here talking about all these different aspects of financial, instruments and tools of trade and stuff.
All right. Well, hey, with that said, Imam Rahim, again, thank you for coming back on. Like you said, it's definitely not a podcast topic, but for those of you that were listening and you made it this far, especially with the first episode and this one, I hope that everyone has a better understanding of Islamic finance, what you can and cannot do. And with that said, we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Inshallah.